Hello. Josh, let's wait a minute or so
Sure,
for people.
sounds good. So let me test my bahasa. Is it right to say apa kabar? Okay,
Yes. Ooh, great.
okay, that's all I know. Thank you. We can end this show now.
Improve a lot from that. You should be able to improve a lot in that.
I'm
Singapore,
sure.
Singapore is, I think bahasa is used in Singapore for some
Yeah,
community problem.
yeah. Bahasa Melayu is the national language, but there are four official languages. So Bahasa Melayu is one of them. Then there is English. Of course, there's Chinese, and then there's Tamil.
Tamil.
Mm,
Oh, wow. Oh,
So that's for the Indian community.
yeah. There's a lot of Indian community in Singapore, isn't it?
So
Nice.
I know apa kabar, I know jaga baik. But then other than that, I used to study Bahasa for like 6 months. But then I went to Berkeley to join you guys. Then I forget everything.
Can you get start again with taps?
Oh yes, I will start with tabs. Okay. Actually, that's a good point. I should have taken tabs now and put it right here, right? And then when you ask me questions, I can drink.
Sure, I have one too. Yes.
You have one with you now?
Well, not right now, but I have a cup. Do you still have
I
taps?
do. I'm wondering whether I should go over and take it now.
You can if you want.
Give me 10 seconds.
1, 2.
Hey, don't count so fast.
Ooh. I think I saw Glenda is here.
Oh, nice. Hello, Glenda.
Glenda, a fellow bear. Nice. Was that what the one that you got when you were here?
Yes, that's right. I've been saving it for special occasions. I think this is one of them.
Oh, nice. Don't worry, I'll send you some.
Oh, nice. Okay, looking forward to it.
Okay. Hi, Glenda. She said, hey, guys.
Hey, Glenda, good to see you.
Join us when you can, Glenda, through chat.
Oh, yes. Okay. Perfect.
Go Bears. Yes, go
Go
Bears.
Bears.
Yeah. So it's 5:06. Let's start. Good evening, friends. Back again with 15 minutes law literacy. It's a program designed to educate or to increase literacy of law in Indonesia in a pretty short time. So it's not gonna be that much hard. So today we are joining by Josh, a fellow Bears from Singapore.
Go Bears.
Go Bears! And thank you, Josh, for being here and sharing your insights with us. So today we're learning about digital risk, especially um, in the AI era. So Josh is a managing director of APAC region, Asia Pacific region of Future Privacy Forum. Before we start, maybe we can talk about a little bit about FPF. What is it, Josh?
So I would say that first, thank you so much, Yulianti, for having me on this program. It's my first time actually doing an Instagram live and doing like a discussion on Instagram live. So it's a first for me, and first time that I'm having like this kind of discussion with Tabs. I prefer this approach much more. About the FPF, so FPF is basically an organization that is global. It's a global non-profit organization that looks at privacy, data protection, as well as emerging technologies. So I run the APAC office out from Singapore, but the headquarters is in DC, and we have offices in Europe, in Africa as well as in Israel. So what FPF really does is that we think ahead about policy, and we provide regulators as well as industry with a heads up on what is coming, right, in terms of privacy and data protection. So that's the future part, the future of privacy part. Then there is the forum part, which basically we have events, we create platforms for regulators, industry, academia, civil society to meet together. So if you think of the technology landscape or ecosystem as having 3 points of a triangle: government, industry, as well as academia, civil society. FPF is the glue that holds all of them together. That's how I like to think of it. So my job is very interesting. It's very, I think, rather novel in this region. And if you're interested to find out more, happy to share more offline.
Of course, and we're always happy if we could collaborate something with, privacy law in Indonesia, something like that. That would be perfect. So before we start, so FPF is studying more about privacy or data protection in a digital environment. We know in the last G20 in November 2022 in Bali, digital transformation is one of the main. But we also know that digital technology carries risk. As we see today, cybersecurity or lots have to do with lack of literation on digital sphere. Would you mind explaining to us what are these digital risks that digital technology carries?
Yeah.
And how?
Sure. Happy to answer the question. I think first let's take a step back, right? I think since the discovery of fire, any technological development has both benefits as well as risks. So Stone Age humans, they quickly discovered that fire could be used to cook and to sterilize food. But if you leave it uncontrolled, then it would spread and it would endanger life and limb. And then even when the Chinese invented gunpowder hundreds of years ago, they used it for fireworks and celebrations, but then people later realized that it could be used as a weapon for war. So I think the same issue exists with digital technologies. So like the internet, right? It was said to have the potential to democratize access to knowledge and information and promote greater civil discourse. But that same invention also gave rise to much greater fake news, misinformation, disinformation, child pornography, and a lot of other malicious use cases. So when we talk about digital technologies, I think it's useful to just give a rough idea of what it is. I would say that digital technologies is a broad umbrella of technologies that reap the benefits of digitization, which is the representation of information in a digital form. So this includes technologies like your computers, connected devices, AI, big data analytics, wireless networks, and so on. So given such a broad bucket of technologies, there are actually many risks that could arise. So I'll try and group them into a few buckets, right? I mentioned misinformation and disinformation. So that's the provision of false information, whether innocently or deliberately, which could lead to the misleading of people in society and eroding the fundamental pillars of trust. Then you have frauds and scams, where people are misled using digital technologies to lose their money or properties or control over their assets. You have the misuse of data, where your personal or even nationally sensitive data is used or misused without consent to the detriment of individuals or organizations or societies. You also have online harms like child sexual exploitation and abusive content, cybersecurity, where access to digital systems is compromised for illegitimate gain, and many others, right? So that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I can go into many more. But as you can probably guess, addressing many of these requires a complex and multifaceted solution because many of these issues are often cross-cutting. So how can we mitigate such risks? I'm sure we will cover more later on during our discussion, but it includes educating society. It includes organizations having proper internal policies and procedures, a strong digital infrastructure across the whole country, and then you need a capable government, capable policymakers, capable regulators, and well thought out regulation that is proportionate and that makes sense, is pragmatic, and so on. So maybe I'll pause here and see what other questions you have.
Thank you. There are a lot of risks that carries start from personal crime, identity theft, misleading information, and then child pornography, and all that. That seems like for me, who are a layman, it would be hard to see what's the connection between what I do online. I mean, we're talking digital technology. I see the internet. Let's just focus on the internet for this six. What I do in internet, probably browse, doing Google search or something, looking websites, shops, Amazon shops, or any kind of online shopping. I don't see that connection from that to child pornography or identity theft, or what exactly will happen that will harm me if I go online.
So if you go online, I think we start from certain like basic hygiene kind of steps that can happen. So if you go online, you are probably interacting with some sort of platform or some sort of application or solution. You're likely to share your data. If you do not understand what the organization that you're dealing with, how they will intend to use your data, they could use the data in a way that you did not consent to. And if you share your data, whether willingly or unwillingly, with an organization that does not have robust data protection measures, for example, well, your data, which could be sensitive, could be breached, it could be leaked. So I think that's one example. Second example, you go onto the internet, right? Sometimes, most of the time, I'm sure all of us visit legitimate sites. For example, New York Times, Facebook, Instagram, right? I watch soccer, so I like to go SoccerNet, right? These are proper websites with, there is proper security on them. You know that when you visit them, you know that there's not going to be, things that are happening in the background that you don't expect. But if you go to certain sites that are malicious, all right, or they do not have this proper infrastructure, well, for example, they could prompt you to download some sort of application that sits inside your desktop and you don't know what it's doing, right? And every time your desktop or your computer is on, it's just processing your data. It could be logging your keystrokes. It could be taking note of when you key in like your password or your username. Or worse still, it could be waiting for the right moment where it could allow a malicious actor to take over your whole system, right? So these are just some of the risks that can arise just from accessing the internet. So I think it behooves us, and I'm sure we'll cover this later as well, to really take certain very basic precautionary measures, even when we are surfing something as everyday as the web. It really boils down to the individual choices that we make and how aware we are when we go online and do our online activities.
Interesting how aware we are in what happened in online environment, because we know there, like you said, there's this legitimate site and there are non-legitimate sites. But as a layman, maybe I cannot tell which one is which, right? And then you also said that in the opening that in mitigating digital transformation risk, there should be a education, there should be government approach, and a proper cyber risk steps that companies need to approach. But how do I know that this company does apply this approach or not, and what it does to me actually? Can you share about that?
I think that's a very good question. I think it will take probably two hands to clap if I were to give it in a simple answer. I think the first is to be familiar with the organization. Do take an effort to read through when you have time, its privacy policies or its policies or, user terms and agreements as to how it will interact with you as a user or use your data or share things with you, it's good to get a basic understanding of those so that you know what you're getting into. Yet at the same time, when I say two hands to clap, because the organizations have a role to play as well. It is not enough if organizations just put these documents out there and they all sound good and nice and they earn people's trust, but they don't follow their own policies internally. And when issues develop, when there are data breaches, when there are scams and so on, and then people do not trust that organization anymore, they lose a trust, they are not accountable, then I think that is where serious problems will arise. So I think it really takes two hands to clap. And that is why at some point, right, regulation needs to come in because the government needs to come in to ensure that there is a fair playing field. A lot of these organizations, they are big companies, right? We don't even need to talk about the big tech companies. They're just big organizations in general. Like you can think of Coca-Cola, you can think of, I don't know, LV, you can think of Grab, Gojek, and so on, right? There is a certain informational asymmetry. What I mean is that we as users, we know very little, but these organizations know a lot. So of course, we assume the best of them, and we trust that usually they will act in our, I wouldn't say best interest, but they will act in a way that does not lose our trust. But if the fact of the matter is that we don't know what we don't know, and they having our data, they could do something with that data. So regulation and government sort of oversight needs to come in to make sure that there is a level playing field between the users as well as the organizations.
Agree. So then basically, we like it or not, by system, when we go online in the internet, that company that we use their site on, website, whatever it is, they're gonna get our data to some level. How do we know that? We should set up some time to just study the privacy policy that usually pop up when we go to the site, right? Or application even, right? And then because we don't really understand what this privacy statement says and how it's actually implied inside the company, government should step in to help us as the layman, the consumer, to put us in the same level playing field,
Yep.
right, Josh? That's if I could summarize it.
Absolutely.
So the title of this session is learning from Singapore government. So what is the Singaporean government approach on these issues?
I think the question here, the fundamental issue that is always top of mind when the Singapore government is thinking about these issues. And to provide some background, I used to be in the government, right? It's public information. You can see it on LinkedIn. So the fundamental question that the government is always thinking of is, with the internet, with digital technologies, you have a lot of innovation and it provides a lot of economic opportunity, potential. But how can you strike a balance between promoting innovation and protecting our own citizens, providing guardrails? I think the starting point here is to recognize that Singapore needs to remain open, an open hub, an open economy, and always open to innovation. But at the same time, this openness also gives rise to challenges and risks. So what's the best way to have our cake and to eat most of it also? So I think the real answer here is that the response needs to be at multiple levels. It's not just a singular answer. It's not that simple. It's a multifaceted issue. And I'll break down the key ingredients for you. You need
Please.
you need proportionate, pragmatic, and progressive laws. You need a capable regulator. You need a strong talent pool, investment in research, innovation, and enterprise, and a stable business environment. So innovation can come from both within and outside of Singapore. So within Singapore, you need investment in good education for our young, or everyone actually, so that our graduates, they are highly sought after and they have the ability to take risks and they dare to try new ideas. But at the same time, investment in research, innovation, and enterprise also means that the government can pump money into strategic areas of innovation. But for innovation that comes outside of Singapore, then you have a good, stable business environment, stable government, stable politics, low corruption, which attracts talent and companies from overseas to develop their companies and their innovations here. But there's also a need for guardrails. So this is where regulation comes in, right? And not any kind of regulation. It needs to be progressive in the sense that, not all regulation needs to be via laws or rules. You can have guidance, you can have codes of conduct, you can have discussion papers, advisories, to nudge industry to behave in a way that is responsible, that to encourage them and to convince them that it makes sense to act in a trustworthy and a responsible way. It also needs to be pragmatic in the sense that you need to always think about whether something can be practically carried out. Because what is the point of introducing such a high standard in rules if the ability or the resources to enforce is not there, right? Or it's too high that industry simply cannot comply adequately and is surprised by it. Um, the question I think we sometimes need to ask is, are we really regulating to ensure reasonable safeguards, or are we simply trying to make a statement? Okay, finally, it needs to be proportionate in the sense that you don't scare away investors by setting sanctions that are too high, but you encourage a reasonable baseline which encourages companies to aim for better. So you may have heard of the term risk-based. This simply means
Yeah.
that you set the requirements according to where the risks are highest, but when the risks are low, then you allow for more leeway. Then I think the final point I'll just cover very quickly, which is at the regulator level, you need to ensure that there's a capable regulator. It needs to be very capable. It needs to know how it's doing something and enforcing something is too much or too little. So in Singapore, a regulator for data like the PDPC, the Personal Data Protection Commission, it collaborates actively with companies which are at the forefront of tech development to know what is coming and how best to respond. Yeah.
Interesting. Perfect answer. I think we have a lot to learn from Singapore government. We need high quality human resources. We need a stable politics and economic, so investment can come. So innovation, it will promote innovation, whether inside or innovation from outside that come in. So we need we as a government need to give a platform for these to come and to growth. I think that's what you were saying in a nutshell. That is actually very interesting. And you say that there's certain level that government can relax and then actually trust the industry to follow the rule. Well, the guideline, the what should have been. But in business, sometimes what should have been is against what is benefit to the company. So can we really rely on positivism?
I understand
And
what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, like how would you approach it, or is Singaporean is already at that level that we as a government or society can actually trust them much on that?
I would say that yes, based on surveys, and you can always do these kinds of surveys, it's true that there is a high level of trust in the government, in the institutions in Singapore, but we cannot take it for granted. And I think the same pressures that many other countries in the region are facing, Singapore is facing also. Now, how to avoid that kind of positivist mindset where companies feel that, oh, they are complying with something, but it's hurting their baseline. And then we might as well don't do business. Now, we cannot have that kind of situation in Singapore. Because if we have that kind of situation in Singapore, companies will just say, well, I don't need to come to Singapore. I can go to Middle East, I can go to Europe, I can go to the US, I can go to China or South Korea to do my business. Why do I need to come to Singapore? So I think what is essential here is to drive a change in mindset, right? The regulator needs to convince the industry organizations and companies that it makes sense to comply with what the government is doing, because in the long run it is beneficial for the company. You need to convince them to see that, okay, if you act in a way that is trustworthy and you act in a way that is responsible, that is accountable, consumers will see it and they will vote with their feet. They will vote with their money. and then you have a long-term business case for staying in Singapore. Then the regulator needs to convince the industry that the rules that it sets in place allow the organizations to achieve that long-term profitability, right? And then there are other things that, of course, go in as well, like you will need to provide perks and so on, but that's the domain of other government agencies. But as a regulator, you need to, I think, engender a kind of mindset change in the organizations. Look, these organizations, they are not stupid. They are made of very, very smart people, right? So the regulator cannot pull a fast one and say, you just comply with me lah. Then after that, you surely, consumers will come to you. You need to, the government needs to show them that, hey, these rules actually make sense and they build trust from the people. So you see, that is why it comes down at the end of the day to, you need that multi-stakeholder kind of collaboration between the government, the people, and the organizations. So when they all double check, right, it all checks out and they all say, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So everything has to make sense. That's what you're saying. So to encourage businesses, organization to comply to privacy law or any law actually, they have to change themselves to be trustworthy enough. They have to show that they are trustworthy, and that happen to products that are make sense, and it doesn't hurt the consumer, and also protects the company's interest in a way that still makes sense in business world, right? Interesting. Thank you for that insight. That should be something to learn. And this is also an interesting point of view in digital transformation from me, that today we have AI. AI is everywhere. Oh yeah, friends, if you are having any kind of questions for Josh, shoot it. Just type it in the column and I'll read them to Josh.
Please translate them also.
Yeah, that's true. I'll translate that as best as I can.
Terima kasih.
But before we go to the question, I want once just a segue to AI. Actually, happen with AI. I think these days people just talk about AI, privacy, ChatGPT, everything is, we are surrounded with AI. Could you explain to us what is AI and what should we do about it?
Sure. So now the question of how AI works can be very simple or very complicated depending on how deep you want to drill. But I think for this talk, let me keep it as simple as possible. Let me just put it this way, okay? Contrary to popular opinion, there is no magic or no intelligence or sentience. There's no consciousness to AI. It is simply a function of three or four things, right? You have a lot of data, you have algorithms, you have statistics, and you have computing power. When you put all these four ingredients together, you get modern day AI technologies. So let me go through them one by one. Data, especially big data, is the organized sort of record and presentation of information. So when you have big data, it is basically a trail, like a breadcrumb that's created by people and organizations as they interact with sensors, surveys, websites, applications. And when we talk about data at such scale, how huge it is, right? There are billions of lines of data and millions or thousands of parameters. You're able to derive insights from this data. And these are the insights that allow AI systems to predict what's the next best course of action. You have algorithms, which are basically instructions. If you think about it, the simplest way of describing an algorithm is like a cooking recipe. Step 1, pour the eggs. Step 2, beat the eggs. Step 3, add the milk. Step 4, put in the oven. Okay, I'm not a baker, so I don't know what the recipe should look like, but essentially it's a recipe. Okay, so you instruct these systems on what to do with that data. So these algorithms, they're based on statistics, which then inform how the AI system should treat or evaluate the data and how to interpret the output from that data. Then the final thing is the computing power, which is the like a car, right? Engine capacity that allows the AI systems to crunch huge amounts of data and run through the algorithms. So just to give some examples, AI, everyone is basically using AI today. I'm pretty sure that everyone that's listening to this call right now and tune in, you are using AI because for one example, you are watching this show through Instagram, and that means you have an Instagram account, which means you have an Instagram feed. But how does Instagram know what is the best kind of content to put up front? It is a recommendation system, which is an AI system. So everyone is using AI system today, and it can be from like in the biggest ways, like organizations with very complex sort of AI systems, or even something just like interacting with Instagram.
Okay, interesting. So actually, we do use AI in one way or another, whether we realize it or not. But then, how does it affect us in digital protection perspective?
Hmm. So the way that I would say is from digital technologies, digital data protection, safety kind of thing. AI does carry certain risks, right? It carries certain challenges. So some of you might have heard of the term garbage in, garbage out, right? This is a reflection of how if AI systems, because they need to be trained on data, if you train them on bad data, then it could result in outputs that are not useful, if not outright harmful. Some of these risks include the risk of biases or outputs that carry unintended discrimination, especially when AI systems are trained on non-representative data or data that carry certain biases. So let me give you one example. Assuming you are a bank and you want to create an AI system that can suggest to you whether you should loan a certain amount of money to a person. But the data that you train on, somehow historically, it's just all men, it's all males. And all these males have successful applications. The AI system will go away thinking that, I should only grant a loan or approve a loan or recommend a loan when the applicant is a male, is a guy. But when the applicant is a female, I automatically reject. That is a kind of bias, right? And if you that's why you need to be very careful on the data that you train for the AI system, you train into the AI system, because you could create this kind of bias without knowing. There is another concern, which is robustness. Robustness is whether the AI system is able to perform just as well when it's given unexpected input. So there was one example where they did in the US. There was this driverless vehicle. Of course, there's AI inside. It was scanning using its cameras. It saw a stop sign, but the researchers, they had put some sort of like graffiti on the stop sign. You and I, as a human being, we drive, we see that stop sign, we will still know it's a stop sign. It's just a stop sign with graffiti on it. But the AI system got confused and it thought that that stop sign was a slow down sign. So imagine what kind of impact that could have. Because if a person is walking, even if a car is slow, you hit the person, that person will still get injured. So that is robustness. Then there are things like transparency and explainability, because these AI systems, sometimes it's very difficult to know how they come up with an output. So that is a challenge also. And then the final one that I would point out, because we're talking about generative AI, is hallucinations. It's accuracy, right? You have seen the famous, now very infamous lawyer of how he used ChatGPT to generate some fake case names and then he submitted it to court. That's an example of hallucinations, right? It's an example of accuracy. These systems, they do not guarantee accuracy. And you always need a human eye to make sure that they're coming up with something that is accurate and usable. So these are some of the risks, but I do want to highlight also that when you look at risks, you need to balance it with also looking at opportunity. These AI systems do carry a lot of benefits, a lot of opportunity. So the key is how to find the right balance in maximizing opportunity and minimizing the risk.
And how?
Very, very good question. So I think it starts with some of the things that I said just now. In terms of regulation, for example, you need to have regulation that is progressive. So you allow innovation to continue, which is why in Singapore, so far the approach to take has not been heavy regulation. It's a light touch regulatory approach, right? They are not saying we need to regulate AI now, we need to have some laws. They are saying, let's study the issue carefully, but in the meantime, let innovation continue to develop first, and then we can see on the back end whether we can have guardrails that protect some of the key issues that we're looking at. So I think the question still really is out there on what is the best way to do it, but it needs to be a mix of regulation, so from the government. It is also a mix of organizations doing the right things, like having data governance procedures, making sure that there is proper oversight in the company, making sure that when something goes wrong, they are they are ready to be held accountable, and they have communication policies on how to communicate in a transparent way to organizations, to consumers and to their employees. Things like that, right? I think it will really be helpful. And for the public, helpful to know more about AI as well, which is why I think you're holding these kind of talks to also educate people on what AI is and what they should be looking out for.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for those points. So basically, you're saying that AI is everywhere and it does affect us in many ways. They collect the big data will collect our data, but then it also we cannot really rely on them 100% because the accuracy point of view and the robustness, and there's also risk of biases. So it depends on the engineer who wrote the program as well, how how biasness of the person will play into the AI program. So we have to be careful at that, and we have to also remember that AI is just a tools, and then how we implement it, the human implement it and use it, that needs to be guarded, or it needs to be steered to the positive way. We know that if we know that this is harmful then to other people, then we should have this understanding that we shouldn't do that. So we are hoping that in the future with digital technology and things like this will shape the community to be a better positive community that not only thinks about ourselves but also the community and the society to grow together. Okay, there's someone saying Josh is so handsome. Why Josh is so handsome? And from Annette. So there's your fan, those eyes with Zs.
I wonder who that person is.
I don't know, maybe your wife?
I highly doubt so. She's working right now.
Okay, that is so interesting. But I'm curious whether the Singaporean society has actually been in that level that we hope.
Mm. So
Whether
mm,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I think your question is really about what do Singaporeans perceive in terms of data protection, in terms of data, in terms of
Yes.
AI. But before I answer that question, I mean, I want to just answer one more point in your last question, which was one more thing that I think is an ongoing effort, and we are still definitely not there yet. There are no clear answers to this. Is we need to develop, I think, international standards. We need to develop internationally understood ways of operating and deploying these AI systems responsibly. And you need international standards because that way you allow for greater interoperability between different governance frameworks, between different regulations, and you have international standard bodies that can also, create kind of like a level playing field for all AI developers. Because I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at the internet, all these common things, all these common standards that you see, HTTP, URL, and all the packets and technologies and standards, you had to have that first in order for people to be able to go on the web, have a common platform, and then they start building. And then you have the very crazy, very live and active internet ecosystem that you see today. That same thing needs to happen with AI as well. So turning to this current question as to what is the level in Singapore right now, I would say that as a highly digitalized society, I think Singaporeans are possibly more concerned about the use of their personal data, and it's come a long way since 2012, which was when the Singapore PDPA was first enacted. At the time, I know that the regulator, PTPC, had to engage in awareness building efforts to sensitize Singaporeans on what is personal data, why is it important. But along the way, I think there's also been high profile data breach incidents, both globally, overseas, as well as in Singapore, that have raised awareness about Singaporeans' data. So Cambridge Analytica in 2016, there was the Sing Health health system data breach in 2018, and then there were discussions about trace together data during the COVID-19 pandemic. So trace together was this like thing. You either had a tag or you had it in your phone. You could use it to basically track, do contact tracing, help the government do contact tracing, trace your location, and so on. So there were a lot of discussions about it in Singapore, and I think it heightened their awareness of this issue. So I think recent research has shown that about 85% of Singapore consumers are concerned about how companies use their data. So that's actually pretty high.
That's very high. Yeah, great.
But at the same time, I think Singaporeans are also very aware of the benefits that digitalized society brings them. I mean, like discounts on Grab, on Gojek, right? Who doesn't want? I
Very.
think there is also a high level of trust generally in government agencies in managing and securing their data. So I think Singaporean consumers are quite smart. They don't necessarily need to opt for greater like legislative protections, but they just in a nutshell, they want trust, they want transparency, they want accountability in dealing with private and public organizations. And as long as these organizations can demonstrate that they're able to take good faith efforts, genuine efforts to protect and use personal data responsibly, then I think Singaporeans will have less issue with that organization. But nevertheless, even in Indonesia, right, this is an evolving landscape.
Yeah.
So it remains to be seen how this perception will grow and evolve in the years ahead.
Yeah, agree. So, Singapore government spent about a decade to actually raise awareness on this issue. I think Indonesia starts in 2016, 2017 with kind of PDPA, but with a lower level of regulations. So I think we still have a long way to actually raise awareness, and hopefully, I think this goes with what you said in the first part of this discussion. The educations of the literacy level of the people need to play in hand to have this kind of society that actually works. Right. Also, regulation that not too loose, but not too strict as well. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And there was a question from Anissa. I think she asked whether I think you touched on this a little bit before.
Mm-hmm.
The usage and what is the advantage and disadvantage of using AI?
Yeah. So I've gone to I think quite an extent of covering what are some of the potential challenges and risks of using AI. So let me just cover some of the advantages, right? So the advantages include being able to have new business models, being for companies to be able to create new products, right, through AI systems. For example, like I said, banks, new ways of servicing or serving their customers. Um, New business models like these apps like Grab and Gojek. I mean, there are AI systems that recommend, right, what is the best route to go. Without AI systems, without all this data, they wouldn't be able to do that, and then you wouldn't have your Gojek, you wouldn't have your Grab. Um, so then you also, at the same time, when it's used by the government is able to provide greater services for consumers as well. So one example that I think is being trialed in the Singapore courts is to see whether there are AI systems that can help to allow for better access to justice, whether they can, provide basic legal information to people, so that they don't need to look for a lawyer just for every small little thing, right? For governments, for example, rather than having Singaporeans go down to the government agency all the time, call them, go down in person to check just for basic information, why not just allow them online to interact with a AI system that can answer their basic questions, and then, okay, now I know what to do, I can go and do it, right? So it provides for better quality of life for people as well. So those are, I think, some of the key advantages: being able to provide greater quality of life, greater economic potential, and hopefully greater insights for the whole society. Those I think are some of the key advantages. So really, you need to have a good balance between regulating too much and regulating too little. If not, if the balance is off kilter, you may end up chilling innovation, or you may end up with too many risks and challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. So AI it's a double-edged sword. It has so many advantages that helps our life. Well, for me, it selects my YouTube feed.